Hello friends, neighbors, John, your Whiskey Neighbor here. Welcome down to the Nook and welcome to a review that should have been on a Saturday. I was down in Calgary at a holiday with my family, which was great. And while I was down there, I went to craft cellars and they had a number of bourbons and scotches that were $20, $40 off. It's nice to visit a store I don't normally go to. And they had Still Austin cask strength. If you're a long-term viewer of the channel, you know the musician, Young from Texas, is one of my favorite bourbons. And I did actually have a sip of this a while back, right when it first came out. But I kind of forgot how that tasted. And when this was on sale, I thought, I gotta grab a bottle. So why don't you pour something big and bold, even better, something out of Texas. And I'll give you my thoughts on this bottle of Still Austin cask strength. And then I will compare it to a sample that I got from Ray, who's from Texas. He sent up some Ironroot Harbinger a while back as well. And so I thought this will be a battle of Texas bourbon. So why don't you pour something, come on back, and we'll sit this stuff together. 3, 4. Thanks for staying with me through the opener. As I said, I have a bottle of Still Austin. Still Austin, musician, young, but very tasty bourbon for me. I really like it. This is their cask strength release. Still young. On the back, it just says aged at least 2 years. So it's probably 2 years. Could be older. Maybe it's by now, maybe 3 years, but it's not old bourbon. And it comes out of Texas and is, I think, I better check, somewhere around 59%. I hope that's right. And they tend to have a pretty high corn and rye. So it's around 70% corn and 25% rye, I believe, and then 5% malted barley, just to open it all up. Let's see. Yep, 59%. Aside from that, I don't know too much about it. Of course, being a good bourbon, it's aged in new American oak down in the heat of Texas. So a 59% bourbon, 25% rye. Let's see what we get on the nose and palate. I find, some spicing, some corn sweetness, corn butter sweetness, a little bit of light toffee, but then right back into some spicing. Cinnamons, light peppers on the nose, not too hot on the nose. Oh, and then I have to take that back. That other sip in there was a little hotter. When I tasted this on the weekend, I only had a rocks glass, and I would say the nose never was as strong as that last pretty deep inhale. So we have spice, we have some corn, like some corn husk even in there, some peppering, and actually a fair amount of heat on that nose. Interesting. Let's give it a taste on the palate. Cheers. Good flavors in the palate. Again, more into savory, almost a little nutty. We've got lots of cinnamon, darker brown sugar, almost burnt brown sugars, burnt cinnamons, burnt toffees. I don't want to say it's, all burnt, but it's that dark edge of spice and caramel or cinnamon or toffee or cinnamon bun, that kind of, but all on that cooked down, stewed down flavors. If I'm chasing a fruit, it's not lively with fruit at all. It's more like stewed apples or cooked apples. It's not a bright cherry or a bright fruit. It's stewed. It's down in there, down in that sweetness. Better try another sip. Cheers. That is a tasty bourbon. Always better on the second sip. Stays in that savory, spicy, yes, there's sweetness in here for sure. That corn sweetness backed into oak, charred oak, good tannins and structure. Now playing in my mouth, it's almost drying. It's got lots of actual fresh oak. Not a lot of fruit and not that bright. One criticism I read online on a couple of reviews is that it's not very complex, and I guess I would echo that. It's not as much of a criticism for me. I think the flavors in here are on point, and it's a tasty, tasty bourbon. For some reason in my mind, the musician, their regular expression, ranks somehow higher. It's not that I remember that being tastier, but I remember being really wowed by it. This This is great, solid. So thankful I got it for a good price. And I'm going to enjoy it. I'm going to try it with a bit of water, but on the weekend I had it over ice, and I will say this is much better for my palate neat. On ice, I was disappointed. It played into bitterness. And that's how I had that first night. And I thought, like what's going on? Then I had it, it was in a big rocks glass, but it was, no water, no ice, and it's true, corn sweetness, spice, little bit of nut, that kind of thing came through. And there it was, and I enjoy it. So this is a great bourbon. Is it the best bourbon in Texas? I don't think so. Let's see how it stacks up against Ironroot. In my mind, though, this is still a solid bourbon. Like, actually, it's really good. It's 3 3/4, pushing into 4 easily. It's very tasty. Well, I said on the title, best bourbon in Texas, or is it the best bourbon in Texas? Actually, I haven't titled the episode yet, so I better be shooting it against another Texas bourbon. This is Ironroot Harbinger, and Harbinger in 2020 was voted the world's best bourbon at the World Whiskey Awards. So it's got a pretty high title to live up to. It's made of 4 different heritage corn varieties and rye. Proportions, I don't know. Here I've got a 25% rye, and that spice speaks. This, I don't know what the portions are, so let's just get into this liquid. And thank you, Ray, for sending me the sample. I finished it now. I kept a little back, and I'm glad I did, so I can shoot this best bourbon out of Texas comparison. Very interesting. Now, it's been sitting around in that sample bottle for a while. Coming back to this now, this has a little more caramel richness. This is missing that. Now, it might evolve a bit in the glass, but it's been poured out for a good 15 minutes. I would have to say it's light, it's sweet, it doesn't have as much spice, and it doesn't have that thicker caramel that I didn't even notice when but in comparison, this is playing richer now than this on the nose. Let's try this Ironroot on the palate. Cheers. I don't know if I told you, I think it's 57.5. This was 59. This is drinking hotter. It's drier on the back end. I don't know if that means there's more rye or it's getting some dryness from oak, but it's very dry on the back end. Almost that kind that just your whole mouth dries right up, and either you want another sip or you reach for your water. In this case, let's go for another sip. Cheers. Even more corn sweetness, corn syrup, and more pepper. Spicy, hot pepper, drawing on the finish. This is drinking like a 30% rye or something. It is spicy and hot and drying, sweet, tasty, tons of fresh oak. But now, even though the criticism here was not very complex and this wasn't as rich, I have to say, in comparison, this has way more heat. If you're looking for just kicking heat, like fireball, whiskey, red hot cinnamon, spicy pepper heat, Thai chili, that's what I'm getting here. Now, in comparison, this is richer. This has some maple syrup sweetness, not just corn syrup. We've got a little more dimension, a little more darkness, and a little, I don't know. So, I was saying this was 3 3/4 pushing 4. I'm solid on 4 on this, and this is under it. In this sitting of these two, even though judges that are better than me and paid for what they do said this was the best bourbon in the world in 2020, I'm actually liking this better. This is 4, maybe even more, and this sits at about 3 3/4. As always, it's just my palate. It's just my thoughts, and it's just in this comparison. Sit me down in front of another couple of whiskeys, and it's hard to know how they'll rank. But here, head to head, back and forth. Way on the finish. A little bit of peanut snuck in there. Or roast corn. Maybe roast corn, like caramel corn, but kind of like cooked more. Interesting. Well, still, I'm sticking with this. On this sitting, I'm actually preferring the Still Austin. What is your favorite bourbon out of Texas? And have you had these two? And out of these two, the Harbinger or the Still Austin cask strength, which one would you pay for another bottle or bring home? Share down below. Let me know in the comments. Thanks for joining me. You guys have a good week.